Good morning on this spring-like Wednesday. Look up, before they disappear for good. New York City is haunted by hundreds of ghost signs, advertisements painted on the sides of buildings decades ago. Many are fading away along with tidbits of the city's history. We recently met up with Benjamin Pasikoff, a photographer who published a book on the signs, the writing on the wall, and he showed us some of his favorites. 6th Avenue between 34th and 35th Streets. The brick-colored sign on the side of the Marbridge building at 1328 Broadway is easy to miss, overshadowed by the colorful facade of Desigual, a trendy Spanish clothing company. It was an ad for Weber and Heilbronner, once one of the largest men's clothing retailers. Its store moved into the Marbridge building in the early 1920s. Mr. Pasikoff said these men's stores were very popular throughout the 20th century, but they could not compete with larger department stores like Macy's, Lord & Taylor, Saks Fifth Avenue and Bergdorf Goodman, he said. Many were bought out for assets, or absorbed by larger stores. Madison Avenue and 33rd Street. New York City was once a leader in designing and producing fashionable handbags for women. The 9 signs on the side of 30 East 33rd Street, painted in the 1950s, showcase now-defunct brands like Koblenz and Alan Miller. A bright yellow sign advertises Majid, a handbag company that has survived. Its offices are on 5th Avenue, a few blocks from the sign. Every time I see it, it gives me a little bit of excitement, said Penny Rand, whose family bought the rights to the Majid name in the 1990s. Lexington Avenue and 32nd Street. A royal blue sign on the back of 192 Lexington Avenue advertises Manning, Bowman & Co., a Connecticut company famous for its metalware, kettles, pots, service kits, fans, toasters, bar goods and the like. Their products represent a beautiful Art Deco style and are in many museum collections today, Mr. Pasikoff said. Here's what else is happening. Mercury rises to 68, record for February 21st, holiday seekers jam trains to resorts. That was the headline in 1930. There was a rush on plane tickets to Boston, too. 55 applicants could get no seats because of lack of accommodations, the Times reported. Today that record should fall. 71 degrees is the forecast high, under partly sunny skies. We also confidently predict that there will be some jammed trains this morning. Tomorrow should be a little more normal, rainy with highs in the mid-40s. The new head of New York City Transit vowed to provide the public with more detailed information as to why trains are delayed. New York Times authorities have refused to release a 17-year-old native of El Salvador who is accused of being a member of the MS-13 Street Gang, despite a judge saying he is not a safety risk. New York Times. After almost 110 years, Yale's famed Whiffenpoofs, an a cappella singing group, have added a female tenor to their ranks. New York Times. Prosecutors' latest examples in the Albany corruption case of Joseph Percoco involve his wife's job, including science fairs, library trips, and a teacher's performance review. New York Times. After a judge ruled in favor of the graffiti artists who created the murals on the 5 Points building complex, questions about the future of graffiti are being raised. New York Times. After nearly 15 years of court appearances and legal hearings, Brooklyn prosecutors are planning on retrying the murder case of John G. Yuka if their recently overturned conviction is unsuccessful. New York Times. East Brunswick, NJ, will be placing armed police officers in its schools, as districts re-evaluate their security measures in the wake of the recent Florida shooting. New York Times. In a small town about 50 miles north of New York City, firefighters staged a fundraising raffle with a prize of an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, springing the town's discussions into the national gun debate. New York Times. Jeffrey Bell, the conservative theorist and advocate for tax cutting from New Jersey, died at 74. New York Times. Kick-Axe, a sports bar in Gowanus, has become a popular spot where patrons can hurl axes at wooden targets. New York Times. For the first time in New Jersey's history, women will be a majority in the governor's cabinet. Pix 11. A new lawsuit alleges that Tavern on the Green, the well-known Central Park restaurant, has shorted its employees on their tips and paychecks. New York Daily News. Today's Metropolitan Diary, Dogs of the Upper West Side. For a global look at what's happening, see your morning briefing. Celebrate Chinese New Year with ballroom and belly dancing at the Lost Battalion Hall Recreation Center in Rego Park, Queens. 9:30 a.m. Free. Learn the basics of American Sign Language at Poe Park Visitor Center in the Bronx. 10:45 a.m. Free. Watch short films by female directors at the New York Public Library Stephen A. Schwartman Building in Midtown. 6:30 p.m. Free. Alternate side parking remains in effect until March 1. For more events, see the New York Times' Arts and Entertainment Guide. On this date in 1965, Malcolm X, the contentious civil rights leader, was shot to death during a rally at the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights. Malcolm, a bearded extremist, had said only a few words of greeting when a fusillade rang out. The bullets knocked him over backward, the Times reported at the time. He was 39. Although Malcolm was born in Nebraska, he spent much of his life in New York City, where he ascended to the local Harlem spotlight and became a national media figure. In the early 1950s, he founded and preached at the Mosque 7, now a Sunni Muslim mosque in Harlem called Masjid Malcolm Shabazz. Malcolm and his family lived in a house at 23 to 11 97th Street in East Elmhurst in Queens. The house was firebombed a week before his murder. He was assassinated by 3 members of the Nation of Islam, a religious movement with which he had cut ties a few months earlier. "I'm a marked man," Malcolm told a Times reporter a week before his death. "No one can get out without trouble, and this thing with me will be resolved by death and violence." New York Today is a morning roundup that is published weekdays at 6 a.m. If you don't get it in your inbox already, you can sign up to receive it by email here. For updates throughout the day, like us on Facebook. What would you like to see here to start your day? Post a comment, email us at newyorktoday@newyorktimes.com, or reach us via Twitter using hashtag NYToday. Follow the New York Today columnists, Alexandra Levine and Jonathan Wolfe, on Twitter. You can find the latest New York Today at newyorktoday.com.